Hey, everybody, welcome to Unpacking the Mass. Today, we're looking at the readings for the 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time, aka all wives' favorite Bible verses. And you'll see what I mean when we get into the first reading from Proverbs 31, which is amazing. And it reads this way: When one finds a worthy wife, her value is far beyond pearls. Her husband, entrusting his heart to her, has an unfailing prize. She brings him good and not evil. All the days of her life, she obtains wool and flax and works with loving hands. She puts her hands to the distaff and her fingers ply the spindle. She reaches out her hands to the poor and extends her arms to the needy. Charm is deceptive and beauty fleeting. The woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her reward for her labors and let her works praise her at the city gates. There you go. I love this. This is obviously a picture of biblical wifehood. And I know there's a lot of people that make a lot of content about what a good wife looks like. And we tend to import a lot of our cultural expectations and reactions and experiences into these conversations. And of course, the things that the scripture teaches. But this is part of what the scripture teaches. And I think there are some nuggets here that we need to look at when it comes to this. Now, when we look at the gospel and the other readings, they're not about marriage. So why are we talking about wives today in this? Well, I think it's because the overall theme for the readings of this week is being a faithful steward with what you have. That's the bottom line. And when we look at what that means, there's a lot of components to that. And this is a great example of what this looks like in this context of a wife using what she has for the benefit of her husband and, of course, for others as well. And it's a beautiful picture, isn't it? To talk about the value of a woman in this way, a wife in this way, it's so true. It's so true. And yet oftentimes in our society, the value of a woman is reduced to either her physical appearance or her complete submissiveness in all things, and basically the less that she does. And I think you understand what I'm saying here. Now, am I saying that there's anything wrong with good physical appearance? Absolutely not. Am I saying that there's anything wrong with biblical submission? Absolutely not. But what we often do in our lives is we run into two extremes. And it's not that we're wrong in what we believe. It's oftentimes what we're wrong in what we deny. And this is a great text that shows us kind of the whole package really here and how important that is. So let's talk about this woman, why she is so valuable, why she is amazing for her husband. And what does a good wife do? Let's just kind of walk through a few of these things. Well, according to this text, she's productive and a good steward. She brings her husband good and not evil. She understands that she has that ability. She understands that she can either bring good or bad to a situation, to a relationship, and she chooses to bring good. See, that's important right there, isn't it? That's about a choice. And we talked about wisdom previously. Wisdom, again, is not about the knowledge that you have. It's knowing how to make good decisions and choosing to do good when you know that what you choose is going to have an impact in that relationship or situation is very wise. And that's what a good woman does. A good wife does. She recognizes the good that she can do and the good that she can bring to her husband, and she makes that choice. And I don't want to gloss over the whole idea of her being productive and a good steward, because sometimes think that all wives are good for in typically like in a more traditional kind of wifely sense, whether you're Catholic or Protestant, is a good wife is just supposed to sit in her house, say nothing. And she's, I'm not going to get into the whole whether or not she can work or not, but clearly this wife is doing things that resemble some type of work. I'm not saying she has a career, but what I am saying is she is out there doing these things, right? She is obtaining wool and flax, and she's working with her hands. And I know that our readings from Proverbs 31 are awesome, but they don't show everything in Proverbs 31. I would encourage you to read the rest of the chapter, because it's going to tell you some other things about this wife that I think are kind of interesting. Verse 16 says that she looks at and buys land, right? And with money she has earned, she plants a vineyard. She's a hard worker. She's strong and industrious. She knows the value of everything she makes and works late into the night. She's basically a woman who is productive and like she makes things happen. And that's what good stewardship is all about. And that's what a good wife does in this text. And I think that's so important. And she serves others. She takes care of the poor. She extends her arms to the needy. And I think this is a powerful thing to think about too. She's not only concerned with her life and her family. She's worried about doing good in the world as well. Now, again, I know people are going to take what I'm saying and they're going to run with it. And they're going to say, well, what about all these women that leave their families to go have careers? Is that a good thing? I'm not talking about any of that. But I'm just talking about, because that's the problem. We take a good thing and we run with it until it's no longer good anymore. And if you want to do that, that's up to you. I'm not saying that this is what this is teaching, but when we deny that this wife in Proverbs 31 is industrious and knowledgeable and is kind of a shrewd businesswoman, when we deny that, we're denying what the text says. Now, does that mean every woman has to go out and do all these things? I don't think this is what it's saying either. This is not a prescriptive list of things that every good wife must do in terms of activity. This is more about the concept of what makes this woman so valuable is that she is an active participant in bringing good to her husband and to others. It's really what it's saying. And I love this next part. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but the woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And this is the key part of this. All of this good stuff about this wife, begins with her fear of the Lord. And that is the number one attribute of a good wife whose value is far beyond pearls and whose husband entrusts his heart to her and who has an unfailing prize. It begins with her fear of the Lord. You see, too many people place too much emphasis on the physical, on the charm and the beauty, but they are fleeting. They won't last forever. But the fear of the Lord grows with time. Beauty and charm have a tendency over a long period of time from, a worldly perspective to kind of decrease. As we get older, things change. And I'm not going to get into the whole age with beauty and all that kind of stuff like that, because I'm not a total idiot. But what I will say is this. Most women, if you were to talk to them, they recognize that as they age, the physical attributes of their beauty tend to change. Is that politically correct enough for me to say that in a way? Okay. They tend to change. And most women aren't typically going to buy beauty products to make them look older. It's typically the opposite. So I think I'm within the bounds of I don't know what you want to call it, wisdom or whatever, to say that these things are fleeting. And the Bible says it. So there you go. You can get mad at Solomon because he says that. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting. But the fear of the Lord grows. And that's what I really want to get into. And we need to value this. That's ultimately what it looks like to be, whether you're a wife or a husband, this is the foundation for being a great prize for the other person, is you live your life motivated by the fear of the Lord, and you are a productive person in your life and in society and for your family and for your community. You're not just sitting back complaining all the time. You're actually doing something. And I think that's ultimately where we're going to go with the rest of these texts, is about being a good steward, because everybody's got something they can do. Everybody's got some resources that God has given them. And when we use them for the good of others out of fear for the Lord, we become so valuable, not only to our families, to our spouses, but to everybody. And I think that's important to think about. All right, let's move on to our Psalm 128. And I speak from experience, by the way. I got to say that, because this when I look at this, I see my wife in this. You know, she brings me good and not evil. And she's very industrious. She's never just sitting around going, okay, waiting for stuff to happen or wondering why someone else isn't doing something. She's a go-getter, and I love that about her. And she definitely has a fear for the Lord, which is what ultimately makes her an incredible prize to me. So I'm so thankful for that. I understand this text in a pretty powerful experiential way, and it's amazing. All right, Psalm 128. Blessed are those who fear the Lord. Blessed are you who fear the Lord, who walk in his ways. For you shall eat the fruit of your handiwork. Blessed shall you be and favored. Blessed are those who fear the Lord. Your wife shall be like a fruitful vine. In the recesses of your home, your children like olive plants around your table. Blessed are those who fear the Lord. Behold, thus is the man blessed who fears the Lord. The Lord bless you from Zion. May you see the prosperity of Jerusalem all the days of your life. Blessed are those who fear the Lord. Now, what's interesting about this, I didn't really unpack this part of the first reading, is the last verse of what we read in the first reading where it says, give her a reward for her labors and let her works praise her at the city gates. That's important because there's this dynamic here in these texts of sowing and reaping, of serving God, serving others, living your life in fear of the Lord, and receiving this reward. And our psalm kind of picks up on that. From the standpoint of the husband, really, of his perspective, if you walk in the fear of the Lord and walk in his ways, husbands, your wife is going to be like a fruitful vine. Your children are going to be like olive plants around your home, around your table. Your children are going to be like olive plants around your table. I don't have a lot of olive plants around my table, but I'm guessing that was a good thing back then. And I think that's important. You're blessed who fears the Lord. And God desires to reward those who live their lives in this way. And that's kind of the theme here. All right, our next reading is from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. Concerning times and seasons, he's kind of going in a little different direction here, but we're going to pull this back together. Concerning times and seasons, brothers and sisters, you have no need for anything to be written to you. For you yourselves know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief at night. When people are saying peace and security, then sudden disaster comes upon them, like labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you, brothers and sisters, are not in darkness, for that day to overtake you like a thief. For all of you are children of the light and children of the day. We are not of the night or of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as the rest do, but let us stay sober and alert. And this is basically the opposite picture of what happens. Our first reading talks about what happens when you're productive and you have the fear of the Lord. The second reading is warning us to make sure we do that. Because if we don't, we can fall into this trap of thinking, oh, my life is under control, everything's good. And then boom, sudden disaster comes upon them. Now, what's St. Paul talking about here? People talk about the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. So this could be talking about the end of the world, right? The second coming of Christ. But this could also be talking about what Jesus said was going to happen when Jerusalem would be overthrown and the temple would be torn apart. That was a great and terrible day of the Lord that was coming, and many people were caught off guard by that. And it could be for us just the normal day in our lives where we have to come face to face with what God has in store for us in terms of his plan that we have to be ready for. And oftentimes we can fall into this complacency where we just think everything's good. I got life under control. Everything's cool with my bank account. My job's going well. My kids are okay. Like, we're all good. Now I can relax. I can coast. I can focus on other things. And then it seems like out of nowhere, boom, something terrible happens and we find ourselves completely caught off guard. Well, the point of this text is that we must always be ready for whatever life may bring. We can't get complacent. We must be ready. And if you take this verse to just mean one specific particular thing, then maybe you won't be as ready. Because some people look back and they go, well, okay, St. Paul was making a prophecy about when Jerusalem would be overthrown, and that already happened, so I don't need to worry about anything. You could think, well, he's also talking about when Jesus is going to come back, and you know, people have been saying that for thousands of years, so I'm not really worried about that happening right now, so I'm good. Well, okay. But The bottom line is this. For each of us, there's a day coming when we have to be ready for whatever it is. Some moment in our lives where we're going to be called to account, where God's going to call us to account for what we've done with what we have. You could get hit by a bus tomorrow. That could be the great and terrible day of the Lord. You could get a terrible phone call from the doctor saying you have a disease, or you could just drop dead from a heart attack. Isn't this an uplifting episode of Unpacking the Mass? But it's the reality. It's true. We have to be ready for what can happen. And what he's saying is, look, you should be, because you are children of the light. You understand the truth. You don't walk around in darkness like those who don't know Christ. You know very well that the day of the Lord is going to come like a thief in the night when you least expect it. So be ready. We are not of the night or of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as the rest do, but let us stay alert and sober. That means we have to be ready. We have to be awake. Now, when we look at the gospel, we're going to see maybe something that was ringing in the ears of St. Paul here, as undoubtedly he heard these stories told by the disciples. And this is from Matthew 25. And again, I would advise you to read Matthew 24. I said this a couple weeks ago or last week, so that you can understand a little bit more about what Matthew 25 is about. But Jesus told his disciples this parable. A man going on a journey called in his servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to a third 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. Immediately the one who received 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5. Likewise, the one who received 2 made another 2. But the man who received 1 went off and dug a hole in the ground and buried his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came back and settled accounts with them. The one who had received 5 talents came forward, bringing the additional 5. He said, "Master, you gave me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more." His master said to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you were faithful in small matters, I will give you great responsibilities. Come, share your master's joy." Then the one who had received 2 talents also came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more." His master said to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you were faithful in small matters, I will give you great responsibilities. Come, share your master's joy." Then the one who had received the 1 talent came forward and said, "Master, I knew you were a demanding person, harvesting where you did not plant and gathering where you did not scatter. So out of fear, I went and buried your talent in the ground. Here it is back." His master said to him in reply, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I did not plant and gather where I did not scatter. Should you not then have put my money in the bank so that I could have got it back with interest on my return? Now then, take the talent from him and give it to the one with 10. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will grow rich. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And throw this useless servant into the darkness outside, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth." It's a familiar sermon or a parable that Jesus gives, and it is just powerful. This is one of those that for me has been so impactful to my life. I think about this a lot, you guys, because I am not a person with a lot of natural talent and ability, but I'm a person who wants to work hard. And sometimes that gets me in a little bit of trouble, but I think it's served me over the years because I have this vision in my mind of coming before the Lord someday and him saying to me, "Well, what did you do with the opportunities that you were given?" And, the truth is this: there have been plenty of times in my life where the answer is not much or worse than not much. And what's motivated me a lot, especially since I've become Catholic, is this recognition of the gifts that God has given to me and the resources that he's placed in my life through his church. And I'm not talking about finances and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the truth of the church, the sacraments, the beauty of the faith that I've received as a Catholic convert. And it's just beautiful. What am I doing with it? What are we doing with it? I think that's something we all got to think about. Now, there's a lot of pitfalls, again, we can step into when it comes to this. But for me, this is a personal journey walking through this parable because I'm always asking myself that question. And I take a lot of comfort in a couple things in this parable that I'd like to share with you today. And the first one is this, that these servants were not judged by what they had in the beginning, but by what they had in the end. And that should give us a lot of comfort, especially if we're people who don't come from much, who didn't start out in the right places. I think a lot of us can relate to that. Some of us had a journey to get to where we are, didn't we? I know I certainly did. Some of us have walked through some darkness or have walked through some sin or have walked through, well, all of us have walked through sin, but some of us have walked through a lot of trials and difficulties, and we can sometimes feel like, well, we're not as useful to God because of things in our past. You ever feel that way, my friend? You ever look at your life and hear the voice of the accuser saying to you, well, yeah, look at what you've done, or look what's in your past, or look what is in your story. You're not qualified to talk about this or share the faith with somebody else. Look what you've done. And I think this text really wipes that out because God judges us on where we wind up. And as long as we're alive and walking that road, the story's not over. So you can live your life having gone a long way the wrong way, but when the truth has been revealed to you, that's a talent that's been given to you, that you understand the truth, that God's put that in your life by his grace. What do you do with that? You go, oh yeah, that's great, but man, I've messed it up. I just want to get into heaven by the skin of my teeth. So I'm just going to be the guy who stands in the back and says nothing to anybody. You know who that sounds like? It's the guy who buried his talent in the dirt because he was afraid. Think about that guy. Don't be him. See, fear is going to mess you up and keep you on the sidelines, and the devil will use all kinds of things to motivate you with fear. Sometimes it's, well, you don't have what it takes. You ever feel that way? God's not judging you on what somebody else has. You do have what it takes to do what he's called you to do, and that's the point, my friends. But you know what we do? We look at what other people are doing, don't we? I know I do that sometimes. And we go, man, I need to be doing what they're doing. Or why can't I be more like that person? Why am I not as holy or as faithful or as fruitful or as well-known or as productive or whatever? And then we get down on ourselves. And the reality is, maybe, and understand what I'm saying here, maybe we're just not as talented as they are. And guess what? That's okay. That's okay. I see Catholic YouTubers and Catholic speakers every day that have way more talent than I do. And that's okay. I'm not called to be them. And you're not called to be anybody else either. You're called to be you. God's given you the talent for what he's called you to do. And here's what's awesome. If you're faithful with that talent, guess what he does? Boom, he gives you more. He gives you more. See, you're not stuck where you are. But fear keeps us stuck where we are because it tells us that we can never grow, that we're good for nothing, that all we can do is bury what God's given us in the dirt and hand it back to him sheepishly someday and say, well, sorry, I didn't want to make a mistake. I didn't want to lose what you gave me. You already did because you let your fear overwhelm you. Man, I'm jumping all over the place. I'm just getting a little fired up here. Here's the deal. God gives you resources and abilities for his purposes. It's not about you. It's not about your goals and ambitions and your vision statement and your whiteboard that you made. I got one of those where you write down all the stuff you want to do and figure it all out. God doesn't care about that. You know what I have in my office? I'll tell you the truth. And it's kind of stupid, but it just kind of came clear to me why I've done it. I have a whiteboard that I made in 2020, the very beginning of 2020. And it's got all of the things that I had planned in 2020 to do, which basically none of them happened because of COVID and all the other things. And I never erased it. I look at it every day because it's a reminder to me that you can make your plans, and they were good plans, don't get me wrong. You can make your plans, but God's got something better. Because you know what's not on my plans? The Rosary Crew wasn't on that plan. Unpacking the Mass wasn't on that plan. A lot of the stuff that I do now wasn't on that plan. Some of it is, but a lot of it isn't. And, I'm probably going to eventually say goodbye to that whiteboard, but it just served as a reminder for me over these past 3 years that when we recognize that the talents that God gives us aren't for us to figure it out, it's for him to reveal it to us and us to walk in obedience to it. There's something to think about there, my friends. God gives us resources and abilities for his purpose. And our job is to discern that purpose and walk into it faithfully and productively. Number 3, I bet you didn't know I had a list here. Okay, so number 1 was the servants were judged not by what they had in the beginning, but what they had in the end. Number 2, God gives resources and abilities for his purpose. Number 3, fear of failure is not a good excuse for doing nothing with what God has given you. I already kind of went off on that. That's why I said I jumped ahead a little bit. But it's so powerful. And why am I so passionate about that? Because I walk through it. And because in a lot of people I talk to, it seems to be the recurring theme. And it rears its head in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's a fear of failure. Sometimes it's a fear of success. That happens too. Sometimes it's a fear of what other people are going to think of you, or a fear of criticism. It can rear its head in many ways, but notice that God doesn't really unpack that with this guy. He just punishes him. He doesn't say, oh, it's okay. You didn't need to be afraid. It's all good. Nope. He just says, get out of here. Take what he had and give it to the guy who's got 10 and throw this guy out of here. Sounds pretty harsh, doesn't it? What is the message Jesus is trying to send to us? What he's trying to tell us is this is serious business. You were created for a purpose and for a reason. He's given you all this stuff for his purposes, and he really does want you to do something with it. And if you don't, you're going to be judged. But if you do, get this, you'll be rewarded. But what will you be rewarded with, right? I mean, it's not just a finite list of, well, you're going to get 10 pieces of gold. No, you're going to get more talent to do more things for God, which is really what life's all about anyway. That's the best thing you can ever be given by God anyway, is the ability to do more ministry for him. That's what you were created for. And you will be the most fulfilled and joyful when you're operating in your purpose. So you can fulfill more of your purpose the more that you fulfill it. Does that make sense? It should. It makes sense in my head. If you're faithful with what you have, God will give you more. And recognize this, you get to decide when enough is enough. So if you ever are in a place where you're like, man, I just wish I had more of Jesus in my life, or more excitement in my faith, or more adventure in my faith, guess what? The only person who's put a cap on that is you. He hasn't done that. Now, he's given you what you have, but now you got to move. You're not just a passive recipient of this and then you just sit there and do nothing. No, the whole point of this parable is that you've got to take what you've been given and be faithful with it. That's how you show God you want more. So it kind of works backwards too. If you ever find yourself going, man, I just don't have enough, or I'm whatever, then it's time for you to increase your faithfulness. It's time for you to say to God, I'm ready for more. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. If you're willing to run the ball, he's going to hand it to you. But if when he hands it to you, you go, I'm pretty good at if he hands the ball to you on the 50-yard line and you get to the 45 and then you stop, you go, I'm good with the 5-yard gain. Little sports analogy. I don't do that very often. I'm good with the 5-yard gain. I think I'll just stop right here. Well, okay. If he only needs to go and you're like super awesome at going 5 yards. Well, when it's 3rd and 1, he might hand you the ball. But what if you're tired of getting handed the ball on 3rd and 1? You want to go for the long bomb, or you want to do something more exciting. He's not going to hand you the ball if you stop at the 5-yard gain every time. Some of us do that. Some of us put limits on our obedience and limits on our faithfulness because we're just kind of we want to get complacent and comfortable, and we don't want to go beyond what we can see. Remember, the Bible tells us we need to walk by faith and not by sight. And the more we stretch ourselves in faithfulness and obedience to who God is and what he's doing in our lives with the talents that he's given us, the more we'll realize that he's given us more. He's given us more. See, too many people just want things to happen, then become bitter. And I've talked to plenty of people like that too. Oh, I'm upset with God because he didn't do what I wanted in my life, or I tried this thing and it failed, or whatever. So, whatever. Get going with what you have. Stop worrying about what others have or what you don't have. And here's the last thing I want to say about this. If you're like, I don't know what to do, Keith, what does this look like? Well, think of something that you can do and do it. If you're like, I don't know what to do, well, think of something that you can do. What can you do? I bet there's somebody in your life that you can go serve. I bet you can go to daily mass more. I bet you can give a little more. I bet you can love a little more. There's got to be something in your life right now, if you really sit down and think about it, that you can do. Maybe you just don't want to do it. You've put it off, or you've decided that you shouldn't because it's beneath you in some way. No, my friends, think of something you can do and do it. Start with what you can do and watch God bring you to things that you never thought possible. This is important. And we got to remember, the stakes are high, because look what happens to the guy who's unfaithful to the Lord with his talent. It's not that he just doesn't get a nicer place in the kingdom. No, he's thrown out. That's pretty harsh. But that's how seriously Jesus takes this, because he's entrusted to you what he's entrusted to you because it's his will and he wants it done. The question is, are you going to be faithful with it? And the good news is, if you are, man, he's faithful to bring you more. Wow. Think about that this week. I'd love to hear from you guys about where this has impacted you and how you've put this into place into your life. So, leave a comment, share a testimony on what God's calling you to do. Maybe that's a form of accountability that you guys could do in the comments. Just say, all right, here's the deal. Here's what I'm going to do this week. Here's how this is going to come, because now everyone's going to see it in the comments and you're probably going to get trolled and whatever. But put it out there. Sometimes you just have to just put that stuff out there and say, okay, God, here's what I can do to be faithful with what you've given me. And then we can look back on that. And, like I do with my whiteboard in my office, which is under construction, by the way, almost done. Can't wait to show it to you guys. But I look at that sometimes, and sometimes I just laugh at my own ideas, which they weren't bad ideas. But most of the time what I do is I just go, wow, God, you are so much better than I realize. You are so much more awesome with your plan than I could have ever imagined. And that's what's powerful. That's what's cool. So sometimes even in the things that we say, okay, God, I'm going to do this. It's not that God looks at that and says, oh, that's the bad thing or the wrong thing or you're making a mistake. No. What he's after is your heart that wants to try. What he's after is the guy who's given the ball, who says, I'm just going to run as fast and hard as I can. And then God will do the blocking and make the way. It's football season here in Iowa, so I guess football season everywhere, but these analogies are in my mind. He'll work out the details. But when he hands you the ball, just get ready to run and see where he leads you. All right, my friends, thanks so much for joining me here on Unpacking the Mass, the 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time. Some of you guys are really picking this up, and I'm so excited to hear about it. I've been hearing from more people who are doing this in a small group together and are making this part of their weekly routine to prepare for Mass and to dig into the Word. And I'm just so thankful and grateful that you guys are doing that. Because honestly, for me, this is something I feel like in the story God's given me. Like, this is what I love to do more than anything. I'm not as talented as other people are at it. I'm not Father Mike Schmitz. I'm not, insert your favorite guy there or whatever. But I feel like I want to do the best I can with this as I possibly can. That's, again, why I'm doing a lot of the stuff that I'm getting ready for with Unpacking the Mass. And it is awesome when I feel like the Lord is taking that one talent and multiplying it in certain ways. So when I hear from you guys how blessed you are through Unpacking the Mass, it just, man, I just give thanks to God for that. So let's keep it going. Let's see what happens and see what God wants to do in you, my friends. All right, have a great week. I'll see you back here next week for Unpacking the Mass, and I know it's going to be awesome as well. Take care, my friends, and God bless.